All right, let me ask you about another element of this. On the present densities, you're going to add 3.4 million, or homes for 3.4 million people with your 1.5 million houses. On your own figures, we're also going to add to our population 2.5 million people over this same period. Are you content that more than 5 out of 7 new homes will go to immigrants?
Well, that's not the truth, and that's not the case.
That's what will happen.
Well, that's not the reality, because where the
2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially
hang on. You can't on the one hand say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses and then say there's plenty of housing already.
There is plenty of housing, Trevor, already, but there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. So the homes, especially under our affordable homes programme, which is social and affordable housing, they will be there for people who desperately need them, local people. We've already outlined how we're going to support veterans and people who are fleeing domestic violence. Okay. Councils need homes for people that are on the waiting list. I've already announced changes to the right to buy, making sure they have
this doesn't quite make sense.
So that we can deliver the houses they desperately need.
Deputy Prime Minister, it doesn't quite make sense. You start the interview by telling me that there's a housing crisis. When I remind you that you have said yourselves as a government, we're going to need 2.5 million migrants. Some of them, by the way, people are going to build the houses. Suddenly, there's a lot of housing. Where are these people going to go?
Well, Trevor, first of all, when you say about building as well, the previous government did use migrant labour far too much.
The interview between Angela Rayner and Trevor Phillips was nothing short of a political shipwreck broadcast live. And let's be clear, this wasn't a minor stumble. This was a full-scale collapse, a train wreck in slow motion, complete with awkward pauses, dodged questions, and a growing sense of panic radiating from Rayner like heat from a burning building. She entered the studio as though she was prepared, confident even, but within moments, it became painfully obvious that she was hopelessly out of her depth. Trevor Phillips, never known for being overly aggressive, didn't need to press hard. A few calmly delivered questions were all it took for Rayner to start floundering. Her responses were incoherent, evasive, and at times embarrassingly circular. She spoke as if trying to explain advanced economics after skimming a Wikipedia page 5 minutes before air. It was less an interview and more a public unraveling. You could practically see the gears grinding behind her eyes, desperately searching for a soundbite, a lifeline, anything. This performance wasn't just weak. It was a showcase of how unprepared and politically shallow she really is. If this is the Labour Party's idea of leadership material, they might want to rethink the audition process. Rayner didn't just sink in this interview, she plummeted. What she needed wasn't a gentle nudge or a helpful prompt. She needed a full-scale salvage operation, a rescue boat, a lifeguard, a helicopter with a winch team. And all the while, Trevor Phillips barely had to lift a finger. He sat back and let her drown in her own contradictions.
Trump made very clear when he came into office, I'm going to make America great again. Yeah. He was looking at jobs, he was looking at tax reductions for his citizens. This is what he said he was going to do. We've seen how he sort of postures, we've seen how he peacocks, and I don't think he's looking for protectionism. Right. I think he's saying, I need now a balance of trade. We've been open, we've allowed your goods to come in, but you know what, you're not doing, reciprocity for us, and that's what I'm looking to do. So long as it's not protectionism, so long as he's looking at people being open and free trade working, then I think it's a good thing. At the moment, I think people think it's protectionism and there's going to be a tariff war, which is exactly what we don't want.
Right. I mean, the idea that Ursula von der Leyen is going to say that she's going to retaliate to Donald Trump is laughable, isn't it, really? Because, for example, as he points out, they've got £350 billion dollar trade deficit with with Europe, because people in Europe don't tend to buy American cars, but an awful lot of European cars, for example, get sent to the US. So there's not really much she can do to retaliate, I don't think.
Yeah, no, and I think you've got to look at Trump's end goals. His end goals are jobs, manufacturing, as I said, reducing taxes. And let's look at that vision. And unfortunately, Europe and Keir Starmer don't have that vision. Keir Starmer is doing the exact opposite here. Instead of wanting to reduce taxes, he's hiking taxes.
Yes.
Instead of looking at his manufacturing base and looking at businesses, he's not. They're now going abroad, closing, shutting down, reducing the size because of these taxes. And I think Starmer would be best to look at how you make Britain great again.
Yes.
And that's what he should be doing, because that spring budget was a disaster. We also now think, oh my goodness, Rachel Reeves could have lost her headroom already, and it's because they're not thinking long term.
Right.
It's like we're going from one disaster to another. Starmer, instead of being a human rights lawyer, needs to be a little bit more like a businessman and say, okay, let's make Britain the best it can possibly be.
But that's the problem, isn't it? They haven't really got any business experience. They haven't got any nous. They don't really have anybody that is anywhere around them who's ever run a business. They have no business advisors. They got Jonathan Reynolds. You know, the closest he came to a business was pretending to be a solicitor. You know, he couldn't even get that right, you know?
Exactly. And you look at what they've introduced, and we all know the horrors that are starting in April, awful April, from the rise in the employer's national insurance contribution. You've also got the workers' rights on the way. What people might not know that happened in Parliament yesterday is now this alignment of regulations with Europe, which means regulations are going to get greater, which is going to be another imposition on businesses. Also this week, Europe, Starmer is hoping to link in again with the trading, the EU emissions trading scheme of Europe. Again, more red tape and bureaucracy strangling our businesses. So as I said, Starmer, take a leaf out of Trump's book and let's make Britain great again.
When Conservative former Minister Esther McVey suggested that Keir Starmer should take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book and make Britain great again, it wasn't just a political jab. It was a devastatingly accurate commentary on the staggering lack of vision, conviction, and identity that defines Starmer's leadership. Because, let's be honest, if there's one thing Starmer could learn from Trump, it's how to lead with actual clarity, no matter how polarizing, rather than drifting aimlessly in the shallow waters of focus group politics and tepid centrism. Starmer's entire political persona feels like it was generated by an AE fed a diet of Guardian headlines and Lib Dem pamphlets. He speaks in carefully neutered sound bites, terrified of offending anyone, while simultaneously managing to inspire absolutely no one. He promises change, but delivers inertia. He claims to be a man of principle, yet bends and folds like cheap cardboard whenever confronted with pressure. Whether it's from unions, the press, or the progressive Twitter mob, even the labor base often doesn't know what he actually believes, because it changes depending on the audience.